Welcome to how to optimize the client-agency partnership using Scrum. We, Blue Coda and Scrum.org, truly believe that this way of using Scrum between clients and agencies is the future of how clients and agencies will work together. And we're excited to share our experience with you and help get our story out there to help you when you go to do your next project. Just to go over the agenda for today so you know what to expect. We're going to introduce you to our speakers today. We're going to give you an overview of Blue Coda and Scrum.org, and then we're going to talk about our project together. And go over things like how we found each other, some of the essential elements that we had to put in place to make this partnership a success. We'll go over the day-to-day realities of the project, and finally we'll end with a Q&A. So be sure to add your questions using the Q&A feature. A recorded version of this webinar will be available. It will be sent to you in a couple days' time. We'll also discuss some ways that you can stay engaged with Blue Coda and Scrum.org after the webinar, so you can find out more about our organizations and continue to learn about Scrum and the future of client and agency partnerships. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers, starting with Dave West of Scrum.org.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar.
Hello,
Jason?
I'm Blue Coda CEO.
Hi, Eric Nayberg, Scrum.org.
Folks, Tim Tufts, Director of Professional Services here at Blue Coda.
And I am Jenna Boss. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Blue Coda, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. So a little bit about Blue Coda. We are a website development firm based in Cambridge. We have expertise in website development, design, Agile Scrum, project management, strategy, site migrations, and ongoing support. We are passionate about creating websites that integrate with an organization's overall objectives, and we make sure that the websites that we deliver to clients give them value in the form of improved metrics, and we put an emphasis on performance, longevity, and security. And I'm going to hand it over to Eric to talk about Scrum.org.
Sure, so next slide. There we go. So a little bit about Scrum.org. Scrum.org was founded and is chaired by Ken Schwaber, the creator of Scrum. We continue to not just help train and educate people on Scrum, but we also provide certification tests for professional Scrum Master, professional Scrum Product Owner, and others, but also the evolution of Scrum. We're doing a lot of work to keep evolving Scrum, helping organizations improve the way they work, improve the way they develop software, scaling Scrum from a single team to multiple teams, scaling up using Nexus framework for scaling Scrum. When you think about what's happening out there in the market and in the world today, there's some different estimates, but there's estimates that about 90% of agile teams use Scrum. And when we look at those numbers, there's about 12 million people today doing a daily Scrum, who are holding a daily Scrum around the world. Those are huge, huge, amazing numbers over the last 21 years as this continues to grow. A little bit more about us. We have about 180 trainers, 182 to be exact, around the world, all teaching the same consistent material, helping to ensure that as you learn, or if you learn in your organization and someone else in your organization is in a different location, with a different trainer, you're learning the same thing. One of the biggest failures we see, and I'm sure Dave and I will talk about this as we go on, is inconsistency. If I'm speaking one language and you're thinking of it differently, now all of a sudden we have this disconnect and we start butting heads. So consistency is really, really important in what we do. We've taught over 75,000 people. We have over 4 million people come to our website on an annual basis. This is important for the conversation we're going to have today as well. But all of this ties back to one Scrum. There's one Scrum guide, one way of doing Scrum. Let's talk about that.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. That does lead very nicely. I think Jason and I are going to take the lead here and talk a little bit about the context, and then you and Tim are going to then actually add the real details of how the project happened. So hi everybody, my name is Dave Wester. I'm the CEO, and I'm actually the person that sort of initiated this whole engagement. So I want to provide a little bit of context to that, because I think it's important. So as Eric said, there's 12 million people doing a daily Scrum, doing Scrum every day, which is an amazing number. It's 21 years old. And that means that over 3 million people come to our website every year. So when I joined Scrum.org about almost 2 years ago, and Ken asked me to take over to help him run the organization, really, take over the day-to-day and let him concentrate on some of the future stuff. We had a website that was servicing over 3 million people a day, and it definitely evolved. What was also interesting is that traffic was from all over the world. So we had, I'd say we had traffic from every continent. We may have only had 1 or 2 from Antarctica, but every continent where human beings are not just full of penguins or whatever. We were having traffic everywhere. Many different people were coming to the site, and the website had really evolved. So when Ken founded Scrum.org, he started with a very simple website and then incrementally added more stuff around community, for instance, some blogs. He added stuff on the assessment and certifications. He added the public classes, and slowly with him and different people were involved developing this website, it had evolved into a bit of a mess. And I don't want to use the analogy of cobbler's children, but there was definitely a large amount of accrued technical debt, and that was a little embarrassing. I'm not going to lie to you. As an organization that prides itself on the idea of professional Scrum, that combination of values combined with Scrum empiricism and really this sort of focus on technical excellence that we talk about in our classes and in our assessments, it was embarrassing that our website wasn't perhaps the most well-architected technology in the world. So we knew we needed to change it. And I started that engagement, and really myself and the team here at Scrum.org really wanted to get ahead of the curve with respect to technology, to really experience some of the pain that our customers are experiencing, around continuously delivering software in modern platforms. Technologies like Docker, AWS, you could argue that AWS is modern now, but so virtualized services in particular, microservices, the use of Elastic Beanstalk, the use of Drupal, but not the previous version of Drupal, the one that had just come out, the use of a really modern, responsive website. I don't know, Jason, is this were we that unusual in terms of not how we wanted to work, because we're going to talk about that a lot, but in terms of the problem that we were trying to solve?
I would say that problem is a really common one. Scrum.org was a bit more unusual in terms of wanting to push the edge and use the latest and greatest that's out there. And, oftentimes we're not using cutting edge platforms and tools all at once. And we got a chance to really get our hands wet with a lot of different new technologies. Really made for an interesting project.
Yeah. And our motivation, as we talked about this at great length, Jason, when we were starting the engagement, was really that, not that I wanted to be cutting edge, but I wanted to ensure that we build a site that was ready for the future as Scrum continues to become more popular. 12 million today, hopefully 15 million tomorrow. Maybe not all come to the website tomorrow, because that might causes some issues. What I was interested also in was experiencing some of those pains that our customers are really facing, because obviously people that are doing Scrum are using a lot of the great thing about Scrum is because it's empirical, because it breaks down things into small chunks, we get the benefit of experimentation and learning continuously. And so that's perfect for a project or a situation or a product that has a large amount of learning required, new technologies being case in point. So here we were. I knew that we needed a new website, and the team here at Scrum.org knew that. And so then we decided, obviously, that we wanted to use Scrum. No surprise there. And so we knew we had a project. We knew that we wanted to use Scrum. It'd be embarrassing if we used a waterfall model. One, because it just wouldn't work, honestly. We would probably still not have released our website. But also because we are Scrum.org, we must drink our own champagne. I was going to say dog food, but that sounds awful. And so that's when we started looking for partners. And I think that what was very interesting, and I know Eric will talk probably more about this, but was we found over and over again when we went to these organizations, one, they were all very keen to work with Scrum.org. They wanted to be able to do a webinar like this, I think, and they wanted to have the prestige. You know, we are the home of Scrum, and Scrum is being used now across the world, as Eric mentioned. But when we actually talked to them, we said, okay, this is our situation, this is our site, 3 million people, very complex site, doing lots of different things. These are the use cases. When we looked at that, and when we brought that up with them, they said, great, we want to use Scrum. Yeah, we use Scrum, we know Scrum. Who doesn't know Scrum? Scrum's great, we love Scrum. And I said, okay, so what we want to do is we want to work off a backlog, which we work on together to see. We want the product owner to be a Scrum.org person. It turns out that it's Eric, he'll talk in a moment. We want the Scrum Master to be somebody from you. And we want to have a team that's both some of our developers and some of your people brought together. And I want to buy sprints. I want to buy the team for a period of time. And basically, I want to buy X number of sprints. And I don't want any of these ridiculous contracts that talk about deliverables and all that stuff. I just want to pay you to that sprint, to that number of sprints. And I want to have transparency and visibility on both a daily basis and obviously through planning, review, and retrospective, we get high amount of visibility of the project. So you can see now we've got the Scrum graphic that's appeared. So what I was talking about really was I was talking about that backlog being the vehicle that is the transparent sort of discussion with the supplier. We had that very clear set of requirements in inverted commas, or things that we desire. Some of them in great detail, we need this and this. Some of them more aspirational, needed refinement. We had a very defined framework called a sprint, which started with sprint planning, where we defined what was the most valuable. That would be Eric, the product owner, doing that. Put it into that sprint backlog, working with the team who would do some sizing, etc. on that, determine where the line. We knew that we were working to a 2-week sprint. Obviously the first sprint was a little bit, I'm not quite sure what we can do, but let's have a go and see. And then we worked in a very transparent way with a cross-functional team with experts from your side, Blue Coda, Jason, Tim, your team of Drupal web development experts. We had our experts who definitely knew what our website did today and had experience on the back-end systems that we use around testing and the like. And we brought them together, and we had clear ownership. And at the sprint review every 2 weeks, we actually looked at the progress. I mean, we looked progress throughout, but the sprint review was an opportunity for somebody who was useless like me to come in and work with the team and give my feedback. And other stakeholders, we invited, Ken and others to join these sprint reviews to see the progress. And even our training community towards we got them involved, not on the first sprint because we were a little embarrassed about how we were working, but after that. And we reviewed that increment, and the retrospective was all about improvement. I wanted a contract and I wanted a partnership that really highlighted those things. So that's what I went to, and it's amazing how many organizations I engaged with who said, yeah, but we still need a contract that talks about deliverables, because you're probably going to get iffy about that. We want to have a fixed price up front, and we want, and it was refreshing when I spoke to Jason, who I was referred to by a friend who had just gone through another Drupal project where they hadn't used actually Blue Coda, much to their pain. They said, they said, yeah, that's really cool. Let's talk about it. You're going to have to help us, get better at Scrum, obviously. And we're like, yeah, sure. And they did that. So why did you say yes, Jason? Doesn't it sound a little bit risky, this whole sprint by sprint sort of thing? And that was a bit scary to me.
So actually what you were seeking, Dave, was very appealing to us, and the timing could not have been more perfect. About a year before Dave first came to us, we made the change from what you'd call a traditional waterfall approach to Scrum. And we were stepping up our game and certainly perfecting our approach. But we saw this as a terrific opportunity to not only get better at what we do and how we applied Scrum to client engagements, but also a key question we get from prospects when we're speaking to prospective clients is, how can I, as a prospective client, integrate my own subject matter experts and engineers within the larger team? And it's something that, frankly, we were not really sure how to answer prior to this project. Stepping back just a little bit, the switch to Scrum for us was a complete game changer in so many ways. For starters, it enabled us to start showing and delivering results almost immediately within an engagement. Under a waterfall approach, it might be 5 or 6 months before a client would see anything functional. Under Scrum, it could be 2 to 4 weeks. As was the case with this project, I believe we had a working homepage within a month, which I know Eric and Tim, you can speak to as well. But also, Scrum greatly reduced our reliance on the tedious documentation process, and certainly reduced the need to get clients to review and internalize and come to consensus over just written text. With Scrum, we could focus on rapid prototyping, hands-on testing and review for clients, and really hit the ball out of the park in terms of meeting client expectations, even client expectations that at times may be left unspoken or undocumented. But this project, a key question is, how can I involve my own people as a client? And I think together, working with Dave, Eric, and the team, we really figured that out. With the right approach, the right team, the right contract, which Dave, you and I can touch on in a moment, building a cohesive inter-organizational team can become a reality in a short amount of time.
Yeah, can we just talk a little bit about that team thing? So it was funny because you and I, and I think it was Tim, had that first, and Eric was there as well. And then we brought Ryan in, and we were talking about how do we organize the work? And I was like, we were like, well, one Scrum team. And it was just quite interesting because we also hired a developer during that process as well, inside our own organization, and brought that person in. And it was so, pairing straight away. It was because you have a lot of Drupal, obviously that's your specialty, Drupal website development. We had a lot of knowledge of the existing stuff that this site was pointing out or getting access to, like a test and assessment, for instance. So by pairing, what we found was it was a very quick way of transferring knowledge, etc. Also, that daily, which initially I'm sure everybody was very cynical of. I mean, everybody is there, they're talking about the work they're doing. It was just that inspection, and it was one team. It was sometimes hard to tell who worked for who, and I thought that was really, really, really great.
Yeah, it worked out great for us too. And it's not just a matter of how can we integrate people that work for the client organization, but I would say it's almost quite desirable for us as an agency to have a joint collective team as we did. It greatly reduces the need for intense knowledge transfer later on in an engagement, because we're doing knowledge transfer on a daily and bi-weekly basis. And as you said, it's really seamless. I mean, it's as if we have this team that kind of floats above our two organizations, and it's a great way to work.
So one interesting just sort of like best practice, and I know today Jenna has drilled into us that we need to get some best practices for the audience. So one best practice, just to put that in underline there so I pass my retro. The one best practice is the Scrum Master being from your organization and the product owner from our organization. I think that was really good, because what the Scrum Master, just to remind everybody what the roles are, so the product owner is ultimately the custodian of value. Their job is to ensure that we deliver the most value that you possibly can. It just happens that if you have a Scrum product owner from New Jersey, which Eric is, he instills value in a way that you could only imagine. So sometimes there's a lot of shouting, but no. But his job is all about defining value, and the Scrum Master's job is to provide an environment that allows the team to succeed, to ensure that the process of Scrum is being enacted, and to ensure that impediments that are getting in the way of the team delivering work, executing on the backlog is actually being done. Now, there's always a tension. The reason why it's two roles in the Scrum framework is to bring that tension really clearly to the surface, to make sure that the tension is, and by having the two in those two different organizations, even though we had developers from Scrum.org in the team, it was really nice that everything was sort of encapsulated, the relationship between Tim and Eric, and obviously they're going to talk about it in a moment, really just summed that up. And I think that the tension of, oh my God, your expectations are unrealistic, Mr. Product Owner, and oh my God, you're too slow at delivering that, even though some people are in our team as well, like they work for Scrum.org, was really, really cool. So I think that was an important thing. So I guess we want to talk about contract briefly and then hand over to the people that actually know what the hell was going on, which is Tim and Eric. So why did I get so much pushback from the other organizations we spoke to about buying basically a series of sprints? Why was that such a problem, Jason, do you think?
So the way that we used to work, our contracts would have a long definition of scope, deliverables. Honestly, we worked under a fixed price basis as well. When you're doing it that way, you really do need to document as much as you can up front. It just, in our opinion, and what we've learned since we switched to Scrum, is it oftentimes increases the risk of failure at the other end, because you're documenting scope before you really had a chance to dive in and do on-site discovery and really talk about what the client needs. A challenge with this project was initially creating a contract that Dave, you and I would agree to, that removed all of that. And in place of a definition of scope, we really just had a rate schedule and a max budget. And it is unsettling to do as an agency at first, but I've come to really see the benefits. It's so much easier to create a contract, of course, when that's the way you're going about it. But it's much easier to get the client to sign on and agree to it as well, because basically we're saying we'll figure out the scope as we go, and we'll inject fresh thinking into the project as we go as well. And we have endless room for evolving needs, and needs always evolve on every project. And the goal is we're not going to lock ourselves down up front. We're going to work on this together and adapt and come to the best solution that we can.
I remember the ironic, so you first created the contract, you sent it over to me, and I just said, no, and I just deleted loads and loads of stuff, which I'm sure you don't often get you normally get things added, right, in the red line. And I just said, this is, okay, I need to describe the Scrum framework and the key the key meetings, the key events that happen, and some of the key artifacts and the key roles. We need to put that in place and just say that you will provide a Scrum Master, we will provide a product owner, got that done. And then one thing that I think is important, because obviously it's risky for you. At any sprint, the product owner can terminate it, and that's in the Scrum guide. We get that working with the team. They can go, oh my God, this isn't working. So it's kind of scary. So we had to put a little bit of, we will buy X number of sprints up front. And I think that kind of made you feel comfortable from a cash flow organization sort of point of view, and it made us feel comfortable that that we got some stability, and that was great, and it worked, and
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a misnomer that you can't work with a fixed budget with Scrum, because certainly by prioritizing needs between sprints and with the regular planning sessions, it's very possible to stay under a budget cap, and inject fresh thinking. And if the new ideas are great, you might deprioritize some of the ones that really aren't that important. So it's just such a great way to work, and it's really the only way that Blue Coda works now with clients. So.
That's great. That's great to hear, Jason. So I guess we should hand over to Eric and Tim and really share what the heck was really happening.
Sounds good.
Sure. So I mean, Eric, do you want to talk first about the initial strategy, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more about the meeting schedule and things like that?
Yeah, I think so. And I want to kind of go back a little bit in history. So I've been involved in several of these types of projects, working at other companies as well, both using Scrum like we did here and not. And I think this probably addresses some of the questions that I've seen started to come in as well, which is I don't know if any of those projects has actually delivered 1 on time, 2 what we thought it was going to deliver in the beginning, and 3 on budget. Generally because you don't know what you really need until you start building it. That doesn't mean you don't create a vision for what you need. You still create that vision, and part of Scrum, and a key important part is, as a product owner, I need to know what I want at a higher level. I need to have that vision. We knew we wanted to use Drupal, for example. We knew we wanted to build a website for a customer experience. We had a set of high-level things as part of our vision for what we were going to build. And then we worked together over time to deliver on the right things. And I think that's really important. It's not, oh, we're just going to figure it out as we go. We still knew at that high level. And in the past, in these other projects that I've worked on, it became very difficult because we built a lot of requirements up front. We handed it over. The agency went off into a black hole for quite a long time and delivered not what we thought we were getting, because we didn't have that ongoing communication, that ongoing review, really evolving the requirements over time. And that became very, very difficult, and actually took us significantly longer to deliver. So I wanted to kind of put that out there first, and we'll address the question specifically. But this was one of the exciting things about working on this project, and it was the first thing I did when I joined Scrum.org a year and a half or so ago, was start and kick off this project. And it was really about defining the vision for what we're going to do. As Tim and I started to work together on it, it was really important that we had a common backlog to work from. So Dave talked a little bit about that, but we were working off of the same backlog. We had the team integrated. It wasn't just important for them to be integrated because of sharing of knowledge, but also over time, we're going to manage this website. So by being able to have my development team understand the ins and outs of what was built, and what made it very, very easy for them to start to take it over as we were delivering. Tim, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not something that we encounter in a lot of our other projects, and I think in large part that's due to the fact that some of our new clients aren't necessarily familiar with Scrum, and to some degree we have to work with them to build that vision and build out that backlog. But you coming to the table with a backlog that had been sort of roughed out was very refreshing. It really helped us understand your vision, and I think it really assisted the two teams in merging and sort of coalescing around a common goal. So that was huge. That's not something that we had ever seen before, but it was a big contributor.
And can you go to the next slide, Jenna? Because I think this is something that's really important that Tim, that you're touching on, which is it's about the Scrum values. Right? There's 2 pieces to Scrum. One is it's empirical, right? It's not a process, it's a framework, and we're constantly inspecting and adapting and adjusting as we move forward. But it's also about these Scrum values. And what's really critical here, in the great relationship that we had as an organization, or 2 organizations, I guess, coming together, was the fact that we really live these values as part of our Scrum team. Going back into that history and other projects I've worked on in delivering websites with agencies, we didn't have these values. And certainly all right, I'll point the finger because I was on the other side, but the agency didn't seem to have those values, right? The courage to speak up when they really knew they weren't going to deliver, to say they weren't going to deliver. The focus where people would disappear. And I knew, I'd start asking questions, and, the answers really weren't coming because they were working on 3 other projects at the same time. They weren't really focused on the product they were looking to deliver, or certainly committed to the team, to that Scrum team. I didn't feel like there was ever respect amongst the team members and the openness to share it. And I think these were really, really critical, that not just were we following Scrum, the framework, but following Scrum, the principles, and really working together as a team and sharing as if we were all ultimately responsible for delivering this working website in the end.
I think it's important to note too, it's not as if we just started the project and all these things were immediately in place. I mean, we were 2 teams coming together and working with each other for the very first time. So I think a lot of these developed over time, but a large part of the contributing factor for really growing these values was really adhering to the Scrum events and making sure that we were having our daily meetings. We were meeting every day for 15 minutes. Everybody was reporting and being honest about if they were blocked on everything. So we had total transparency there. We're having regular planning meetings. We were having retros, and I'll talk about the retro a little bit more in just a sec. And we were also demoing the work, and you were inviting stakeholders in to provide feedback. That was all huge to keeping us on track and keeping everybody honest and making sure that we had full transparency on both sides. Speaking of the retro, I think personally that was really the one event that I think really helped the teams come together and really understand where everyone was coming from. I mean, courage is at the top of the list here. The retro is that time when you really, you step up, you speak what's on your mind, and everyone gathers around that and says, all right, well, how can we improve? How can we get better at working together? And I think those retros were really key to helping both of our teams merge and meld as a single team. So
I definitely agree. It was really, were we a team initially, as Tim said? No. In any team that's formed, whether you're all one company or broken up across multiple companies, you're not one team. Right? It takes practice. It takes learning. Whether we're playing a sport as a team, I don't think who just won Pittsburgh just won at the NHL championships. I don't think they would have won without practice, and they wouldn't have come together as a team without that practice. And it took us time. It took us a few sprints to come together. That doesn't matter if we just assembled a team from one organization or we assembled a team across multiple organizations. To get that predictability, to get that understanding of each other does certainly take some time.
It does, yeah. I mean, personalities are at play, everyone getting to kind of understand each other and how we all work. It takes a little bit of time.
But I think, all in all, what we did is we had a focus and a common goal. And that's what was really, really important. And heading into any sprint, you have a sprint goal. And delivering something toward that goal and everybody being maniacally focused on that goal was critical. And being able to share that knowledge across the team and being able to leverage the knowledge of some of the folks on the Scrum.org development team and on the folks on the development team from Blue Coda, being able to share that and meld it. I saw people grow throughout this process as well. People who thought of themselves as a front end developer all of a sudden are doing back end work and things like that. People who thought of themselves as an operations person writing code and so on. And I don't mean that we're training people to do different things than they're trained to do, but it's getting that mentality out of, I can only focus on this one little thing. There was a lot of pair programming going on. There was a lot of, we'd sit at our daily Scrum, so I didn't say stand up, but we sit at our daily scrum because I'm sitting in my chair right now. But in our daily scrums, something would come up that somebody was struggling with. Next thing you know, Ryan would say, "Hey, Rory, let's pair on this," and then they'd go off and they'd use a product like what we're using here to share screens, and they'd pair on it to come up with solutions, and really got that team think happening to really help. Now, does this have anything to do with vendor and Scrum.org relationship? No, this was team. This was Scrum Team working together to solve those issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a couple. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
But I was just going to say a quick time check, Jen. I know you want to transition to questions soon, but Eric.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good jumping off point, I think, for some of the questions that are coming in. So maybe we'll transition to those.
Yeah, I think some of these actually gel really well with what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, so one question that came in, which you already addressed a little bit, but it is, since the team members were provided by multiple organizations, how did you optimize productivity at a rapid pace, considering people had not worked together before and were at different locations?
So I just like to emphasize, there's something that really, really annoys me, that our industry has become, thinks using a factory mentality, the idea that the objective and the ultimate objective is to ensure that each individual stage, resource, dare I say, of the life cycle is as most efficient as possible. Software delivery is not analogous to a factory. It should never be. It's not, every single widget that we produce is unique, is based and is changeable and will continue to change. So I think that this maniacal focus on productivity is misinformed, because if you focus on productivity, you often start optimizing the individual parts instead of the overall. I mean, to be honest, Jason and Tim, we could have optimized for you guys. You could have optimized your process and built the wrong thing for us. Eric, you could have optimized your process and spent the entire time writing requirements and detailed requirements. Instead, we built an environment that was all about delivering value. It was all about focused on learning, which was all about making things visible and transparent. And so, that not only does that ensure that ultimately we get value for money because we build the right things, but it also ensures that the team is actually super productive, because visibility and transparency, openness in terms of the Scrum values on the daily Scrum, as what Tim said around, or Eric said about pairing, instantly highlighted weaknesses and breakages in the process, whether it be the release process, whether it be the code review process, whether it be, and yes, we did use some technology like GitHub. Yes, we did use Jira. Yes, we did use, the Slack, very big into Slack. We used some technology to help, but ultimately it was that openness. I don't know, Eric, I got a little bit passionate about that, please.
I agree. We optimized around value and around delivering value and prioritizing our product backlog in that way. The first thing we looked at in our first sprint goal was deliver a working homepage. And then we prioritized backlog items based on that, because that was going to give us the feedback as far as starting to build out designs. One of the things that we did that we didn't touch on, but I think is really important, this comes up a lot in conversations that I have with folks, is, well, what about a design sprint, or what about design? How does design fit in, and so on? We actually implemented our designs as we were designing them. So we had a designer as part of our Scrum team, as part of our development team. That designer was not full-time on our team. I believe he was working on other projects or other products as well. But what we would do is he would come in as part of the sprint, and early in the sprint do some design work, and then we'd implement as the development team those designs so that we could actually test them and validate them. There's nothing worse than you have this great designer who has the grandiose ideas and is a master at whatever Adobe product, Illustrator, whatever one they use, but it has no touch of reality in actual software development. But by being able to have him build those or do those designs with our development team actually implementing them, we were much, much faster. We were much more optimized for productivity because I was able to go back as a product owner. I was able to share with my stakeholders, hey, we built out this design, and they said, well, why wouldn't that be a drop down? Now, if you just look at a picture and you touch that picture, it's like, well, you know, but if you actually now try to do it in code, say, ooh, that would work better as a drop down. Ooh, you know, as I'm scrolling down, that thing is way too far below the fold. Now it's reality. And we were actually much more productive in this way because we were working together as a team. So designing and building within the same sprint.
And what's great is the real-time testing of assumptions. And an old school design process, you know, we would show you static comps that you can't really tell how you would interact with them because they're static. And then subsequent rounds of design would be based on what you thought of the initial round. And it might be months before anything is built and actually working. You know, here we can so quickly go from design to build to hands-on feedback that you know right away where you need to go from there.
Yeah, and you know, Luke, to answer part of your question, we had folks, I think, in 5 or 6 different locations all working together. But it didn't matter that they weren't sitting in the same room. They were using technology like Slack and other things to share screens, to share technology as if they were sitting right next to each other. They'd hang out in a Google Hangout all day if needed. If they were just focused on something, they'd shut down out of that to be able to work together. So we didn't see productivity as an issue. Did it take a little bit of time to get the Scrum team up and running and at I'll say full capacity, which you know is a bad word, but yeah, of course, just like any other team, it had nothing to do with location or separate teams.
Something I'll say too about the phases, just having used Waterfall in the past, is yeah, it makes sense in terms of, you know, setting up all the ducks, getting them in a row as you're building the site out. But I mean, those things are so interdependent when you really think about it. We're talking about developers giving a designer feedback, designer asking developer what they need including in the designs. These things are really integral to one another. And so breaking them up into separate phases, while it might seem neat and tidy, it ultimately undermines the goals of each of those phases. And so having them overlap, having them combined into sprints, it just helps the overall product to be that much stronger in the end. Something else that I'll say too is, I get asked quite a bit, how does design work with Scrum? Well, it's just like development. It fits into Scrum quite well, actually. You know, you create a task, a ticket, what have you, usually with some guidance from the product owner, and the team reviews the ticket and decides what needs to be done there. I mean, it's no different than development. You're creating an end goal, you're talking about it, and you're iterating on it, and that's really how well it works into Scrum.
And it all, as Tim said, it all fit right into our product backlog and then into our sprint backlog.
I think this ties into another question that we got through the Q&A channel, and I'll kind of rephrase it. So if there's somebody within an organization who's a stakeholder who's not as familiar with Scrum, how do you get them on board with these types of goals, which require kind of a nuanced understanding of how design and development and Scrum work?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I'm sorry, Eric, did you want to?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I mean, we come up against this almost with every new project, and it's perfectly understandable. I mean, we work with a lot of different industries, and they're completely unfamiliar with Scrum. They've got no background. They don't know what to expect, and so we sort of start with the basics. You know, we talk about the Scrum guide. We have them read that before we actually meet, and we talk about what really are the pros of using Scrum, and that's all in the interest of sort of getting them started. And then on day one, we really have a planning meeting. We effectively talk to them about their goals. We help them generate their product backlog and actually break those down into deliverable tickets. So it's a lot of hand-holding. There's a lot of guidance there, really sort of getting them to understand the value that Scrum has, especially in being able to see projects progress at regular intervals when we have those demos, when we meet on a regular basis. But it's also to some degree holding their hand while they're actually pulling together the requirements, or while they're pulling together that product backlog, so that they can properly articulate what we need to be working on. But also part of that process is we can also educate them as far as what best practices are going to be, where they may need to head in terms of optimizing their site for SEO, just as an example, to throw a nod to Jenna. But we work very closely with our clients that are unfamiliar with Scrum, just to really get them onboarded.
Jenna, can you go back one slide?
Sure.
So I think there's one of those Scrum myths that a sprint backlog is a commitment, and it's not. So I'm looking at Andreas, your question, and a sprint goal is set by the product owner. What is the thing? What is the goal that we want to achieve during this sprint? And as a product owner, you prioritize your backlog items around that. What's pulled into that sprint backlog is what you think you're going to achieve. It's not a commitment to achieve those things. And often we would pull in just enough, and just enough, sometimes just enough to get started, and we continue to prioritize that backlog along that goal as part of our planning, and pull those things into the sprint backlog based on the goal. It's the development team's role to prioritize, once in that sprint backlog, how they're going to do the work and work on that. So they don't need to understand Scrum to be fair, to understand a goal. I think any of us understand the goal. Our goal is to deliver a working homepage. And here are the things I want on my working homepage, which I put as my product backlog items. I think that's pretty clear. Or my goal is to do X, and here are the things that make up X. It's really about understanding product backlog, not necessarily understanding Scrum, but it gets everybody working on the same page, working toward the same goal. And I think that's really, really important. Otherwise, we're off doing all different things. And maybe it also helps me as a product owner establish the right product backlog priorities. Because if I start throwing product backlog items that are all over the place, that have nothing to do with that goal, now the team's not going to be productive. Back to that earlier question, we're not going to deliver a working increment, and we're probably not going to meet that goal, because I don't know what that goal is. So by establishing that goal, it really helps us all start to work better together.
Eric, just to add something to that, what I really liked, because you were delivering into an environment that was exactly the same as production from pretty much day one, not quite day one, but very quickly. The beauty of it is that you said you'd articulate to me, I was a stakeholder. I wasn't in the Scrum team. And I'd say, hey, what are you guys up to? And Eric could say, well, we're focused on the homepage. And because I had the link, as you delivered more functionality to it, I could just look at it continuously. And yes, because I'm a little bit naughty, I did create Jira tickets, issues, and said, oh, I don't like this and I don't like that. And Eric, of course, moved them and said, that's because you haven't realized that this is only this bit, and because you don't know the context. And so we did have to learn a little bit about, and just come to the sprint review and you'll get the context. And finally, I came to the sprint review rather than just looking at things early in the morning when nobody else was around. But it was great, this continuous, they released continuously all the stuff that they were building inside the goal. So I felt like, oh, I can check and have a look at that. And I knew that at least it was just about the homepage, for instance, using this example. So I'd concentrate on that. It was a really cool way of working.
So I think there's two questions that are kind of similar that are in the queue here, Jenna. One about, how do you mitigate keeping clean Scrum process versus Waterfall, present during negotiation and quoting, and in quotes here he says, don't say do sprint-based billing. Whoops. And then another, with no formal contracts, how did you guys get paid? So I don't know. I've got some thoughts on that to address it, but I wanted to hand that over to Blue Coda first.
Oh, damn. I wanted to talk about that, but fair enough. Jason, you should take it first. And Tim.
Well, so we essentially build using a time and materials approach. So we were paid for our hours, actual hours logged on the project. And Tim, I don't know if you want to rope in sizing and things like that into that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I mean, we billed monthly for hours logged, and that was applied against the project or the engagement cap that Dave and I set in the contract.
Now, interestingly, it became there's a rhythm to it, because guess what? Because they were focused, everybody was working on the same thing. Yes, we did get some additional people did join the team for a little while. Designer, for instance, Eric's talking about that. SEO expert came and helped us for a bit. But generally, it was even though it wasn't formally sprint, it wasn't per sprint, it became like that because the cadence was so regular, the amount of time, it was sustainable, 40 hours a week broadly, between 36 and 40 hours a week. It was nicely sustainable. It was clearly transparent because we saw velocity, we saw estimates, we saw actuals in terms of the plan. Not that I was using that against anybody, but ultimately we built a very strong trusting relationship. But I do want to add something that's in the question that says, don't say do this kind of billing. If you want the benefits of Scrum, ladies and gentlemen, and you want to move to an empirical, agile approach, then you can't say, yeah, we want all the benefits, but we don't want to change. We still want traditional upfront planning and then a fixed price contract, and we want change orders on top of that, and we want all of that. But we want to do Scrum. You can't. I mean, the bottom line is you just can't. You have to work. If you're going to take advantage of Scrum, that doesn't mean you can't take some of the values of doing incremental delivery, etc. but if you want to get the real benefit of Scrum, you have to approach it not just in terms of how you work, but how you plan work, how you fund work, the values that you talk about, the trust that you have to develop, the team, all of those things have to be in place, and then you get the value, honestly.
Yeah, and this comes back to the earlier thing that I talked about, right? The fact that just because you're working Waterfall doesn't mean you're actually going to make your budget. You're going to know when you're going to deliver. You're going to know how many people you need on the team and so on, just because you captured all your requirements up front, because generally you don't. And 18 months later, you failed. So just because you put a nice contract in place that says, I'm going to assign 5 people to this team that deliver all of these requirements, doesn't mean you're ever going to be successful. So I think what Blue Coda did was super smart in working with us, which wasn't we're going to commit to deliver. It was still, I don't want to use the word commit, but the contract was still based around delivering a working website in the end. But it wasn't about all the requirements and all the time that it was going to take. It still became more of a time and materials type of contract and agreement as we built out over time. And we became much more predictable that way. We were able to, it may have been a little bit harder for Jason and Tim to plan their future. But, once you get into that rhythm, you kind of know, and you know where you're going. And we still plan out, right? So if you think about Scrum and then how do you scale Scrum using the Nexus framework, you're still planning out 3 months at a really high level. We knew what our backlog was, probably about 3 to 5 sprints out. We didn't prioritize it. We may not have refined it down to the level it needed to be working on those items, but we could at a high level kind of get some predictability and vision into where we were going to be 2 sprints from now, 3 sprints from now. So it wasn't like we're just working in, here's our sprint and we know nothing beyond this sprint. We still knew what we were doing and how we were going to move that forward.
Yes. Eric,
just the pairing.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. The pairing of time and materials with Scrum, it's just such a great combination. And I really believe it reduces risk for the client, because the client is seeing how stories and tickets are sized, and then on a regular basis, seeing how we come in on those estimates. Are we tracking well? Are they seeing the right progress for the money being spent? And that feedback is constantly coming. If you pair time and materials with a waterfall project, the deliverables are spread so far apart that there's a lot of risk in between, you know, you don't know if the consultant or the agency, us, is running over or not spending time in the right places or spending too much time here when it should be over here. Time and materials in Scrum just works really well.
You know, we definitely had a massive amount of transparency. So what Eric was talking about was the concept of refinement. One thing that's crucial on any project, in my opinion, but definitely when you're working with a third party whose people might have other priorities and other needs, refinement really gives you that vision, that future look. So we made sure that we did refinement every sprint, and we use that as a mechanism to really raise the transparency so that when I said to Eric, are you still working on that website? Haven't you finished yet? He went, oh, look, this is the plan for the next. I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I believe you're actually making progress. Oh, good. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, we're also very good too about implementing some very clear workflows to eliminate technical debt, so that, you know, we didn't have a hardening phase at the very end of the project or anything like that. But again, testament to how well I think our two teams work together.
And the fact that even though we're working on cutting edge technology, that you work together to fulfill it. One thing I would recommend, you know, because time and material sounds like you're just buying manpower. The reason why it was so much more powerful when working with an organization like Blue Coda is that we could pull in resources, pull in people. Actually, and sometimes it was things that they'd done before, and use that and maybe do some. It was like almost having a community around your team, which was what Blue Coda provided for us to really help us solve some problems.
Bringing in different sets of expertise, bringing in components that they have built for other projects and products, bringing in other people and individuals to help in different areas. So it wasn't just, oh, you bought this person. It was a team.
Yeah.
And there's so little administrative overhead with this approach. You know, under fixed price waterfall, everything's a change order, and you're pricing features up front before you really know what they're going to entail or require. So no matter what, it's going to need to change. And you know, we were able to skip that completely. And if the Scrum.org team got something back to us more quickly or wanted to make a feature request more simple, well then, you know, they save money there and we can apply it elsewhere or just pivot. It was really quite flexible and allowed for continuous evolving needs.
So I would just like to say, you know, all of these points are great, but if we have somebody on this webinar who is a Scrum advocate within their organization and they need to get other people on board with the Scrum approach and with the time and materials as opposed to fixed price, how do they go about doing that?
So the question was, how do you get people on board that aren't into this and they want to work in a traditional way? Well,
that's right.
So that's always a challenging question. Changing people, as my grandma says, people are odd and they're hard to change. So the thing that we find is the most important single thing that drives change is that there needs to be a reason to change. If your organization is doing really well and delivered loads of websites in this way and it's all working in a traditional way and it works perfectly, then there's no reason to do this. It'd be very hard to compel anybody to do it. If, however, you're in a situation where you've got large amounts of uncertainty, maybe it's because of new technology, maybe it's because of new business you're trying to move into or a new situation, then this is a great way to work. What you might want to do is you might want to say, hey, let's try this for 3 or 4 sprints, so 8 weeks, say. Maybe 10 weeks, you know, some small amount of time relatively, and then let's start working in this way. And remember, the beauty of Scrum is at the end of every sprint, you have the ability to go, this is horrible, we're not going to do this. Now, the worst you've wasted if your sprints are 2 weeks is 2 weeks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the real world, 2 weeks, how many times do we waste 2 weeks just mucking about? Well, this gives you the ability to muck about in a directed fashion, and you actually get something that's usable at the end of it. It highlights the weaknesses and the strengths of the team. It really does make everything truly transparent. Scrum is easy to implement. Now, what it shows you might be horrible, and you may discover that you haven't either the skills, the business decision making, your product owner might not be able to make decisions, your infrastructure doesn't allow you to continuously release software, the business is all over the place, the partner you're working with doesn't have the skills, because obviously that's not Blue Coda, but it might be somebody else. It may make all those things painfully transparent, but isn't it better to learn that after 2 weeks rather than after 3, 6, 9 months? That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I mean, to further address, I think you're going after Andreas's question. Part of what he asked is, our product side is fixed. The product managers aren't technical enough or don't have the resources and sufficient leadership. You need a single product owner. You need somebody who's ultimately accountable for what's being delivered, but they don't have to do it alone. The development team is part of this. The development team should absolutely be part of defining what's in the product backlog and certainly what's in the sprint backlog. If you expect one person or one role to do this all by themselves, you're gonna fail. As the product owner, I've got some technical depth, but in some places not so much, and worked with my development team and other folks outside of the development team to help refine and create that product backlog. But we had to work together as a team, and this brought it really together. And you talk about how you've got different parts of your organization, Andreas, that are responsible for different things. Well, how do you actually bring that together to deliver a single product if you don't work together as a team? So if you're responsible for the back end and your group's responsible for the front end and that group's responsible for SEO, guess what? You're probably going to fail because if you're not working together as a team. You're delivering one product. I don't care what piece of the product you're delivering. You want to break into component teams, that's fine, but you're still delivering one product at the end. And if you don't have an integrated increment that you're delivering and you're not overcoming the issues that you have with integration, you're going to fail. I talked a little bit about Nexus, and you can learn more about it certainly from our website under resources, How Do You Scale Scrum? But Nexus talks a whole lot about how do I deliver a working increment and overcome dependencies across those teams. And if you don't overcome those, you're going to have a great back end, a great front end, and you're going to have some great content that doesn't work together. So you need to do this, whether you're working in Waterfall or you're working in Scrum, whether you're working as one Scrum team or multiple Scrum teams, whether you're all co-located or you're all sitting in different places across the globe in different companies. It doesn't really matter. You still need to deliver one thing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're a few minutes after 2, so I think it's time to wrap it up, or maybe it's a conversation to be continued on a separate webinar. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone on our webinar knows what to do if they want to continue to engage with Scrum.org and or Blue Coda. So Eric, if you want to talk a little bit about
check out the work that we all did together. Come to the website, so you can see it there. But just come to www.scrum.org, and you can find all of the resources and things you need to learn about Scrum, to take training classes, to get certified when you're ready as well. There's lots of free ungated assets out there to help you learn more, because our mission is improving the profession of software delivery, and that is our goal, to help you do that.
Great. For those who want to connect with Blue Coda, you can visit our website, and we're actually about to launch our own website redesign that we created using the Scrum framework. So once you get to our site, there's a form and it's exclusively for webinar attendees, and you can sign up to be notified when our new site launches, and also get some information on how to get a free 30-minute consultation with us on your next project. And just use the offer code Scrum when you fill out that form, so we know that you're a webinar attendee. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. And does anyone have any final thoughts before we let our viewers go?
No, I
Dave?
think we set it up. I of course I could talk, but I'm not going to. Thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you, folks.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.